Welcome back. Will tomorrow's job numbers be the key to determining whether the economy is headed for a recovery? To find out, let's go to Kathleen Hayes, who joins us with a special guest. Kathleen?
Tricia, thanks so much. I'm joined now by Michelle Girard, RBS Securities senior economist and managing director, who says jobless claims show progress being made on the employment front, even if it's not quite enough yet. Right, Michelle?
Right.
So, let's talk about, for example, the peak in jobless claims. We got that in late March at 674,000, down to 550,000 now. Is this sort of the definitive signal now that the recession has ended, is ending?
Well, you know, we've obviously, along with others, have done a lot of work on the relationship between initial claims and the economy, and it is true that the peak in initial claims has really occurred within a month of the bottom of the, within 2 months of the bottom of the recession. And so, given that, as you said, the claims figures peaked in the first week of April, it almost suggests that perhaps the recession is over already. Now, I don't think we're seeing what we need to see on the payroll side in order to say that the NBER, which officially dates the starts and stops, will say that June is the end. I think we need to see more progress on payrolls, but clearly we're getting close to the end here in terms of the recession.
You know, another important number that I think gets a little bit lost in the shuffle in this report is called the insured unemployment rate, which is the number of people eligible to collect those weekly benefits, and on top of that, the number of people who are actually unemployed. It's down to 4.7%. It peaked about 5 weeks ago at 5.2%. What does that tell us about the report we're going to get tomorrow, particularly the national unemployment rate, which is still forecast to keep rising from 9.5 to 9.6%?
Well, one of the things that's a little bit tricky when you're looking at some of these other measures in the claims report of continuing claims, the insured rate, as you talked about, is the fact that, unfortunately, because the recession has lasted so long, we're in a situation where a lot of people are just no longer eligible. They've exhausted their benefits, and so to some extent, some of the decline that we've seen in in continuing claims in the last month or so, it may just simply reflect the fact that people have exhausted their benefits. But I do think what we're seeing in both continuing claims and the insured rate that you talk about is the follow-through, the feed-through from the fact that fewer people are getting laid off. Now, I do still think the unemployment rate is going to be headed higher. As everybody talks about, that does lag the economy. And so even if the recession ends in the fall, we still think the unemployment will probably climb, peaking around the turn of this year close to 10%.
Mark Crumpton, I believe, wants to get in here. Mark?
Michelle, thanks so much for coming on. I was noticing that we have some information that these claims, at least people continuing to claim benefits, that number is on the rise. Does that give you cause for concern?
Well, you know, the number of people that are actually receiving benefits, you know, as long as the initial claims figures are still rising and they're still positive, we're going to see the pool of workers tending to widen or grow, as you said, until we get more of hiring. And, you know, that's sort of what Kathleen was alluding to, I think, at the start of the program is, right. You know, we are getting lower layoffs, but just because people aren't losing their jobs doesn't necessarily mean that companies are starting to hire workers. And, of course, that's when, you know, the turnaround is going to be most clearly apparent in those continuing claims numbers that you talk about. We need to see firms start hiring, and, you know, we're just not seeing that yet. You know, tomorrow we expect to see jobs down another 325,000. Now, that's a whole lot better than we saw, you know, in the first 6 months of this year, or certainly the first 3 months of this year. But again, it's still a far cry from zero.
Michelle, how important is this jobs report tomorrow? I always say it's sort of like the mother of all reports, at least every month. The first big one covers the nation's economy. How much is riding on this report? How are markets positioned?
As you said, I think it's going to be closely watched. It's always important because it's so early in the month, but it's really important now because we've had a lot of good news about the economy coming into the week. We obviously, ISM Manufacturing Index really helped to spur optimism, people talking about third quarter GDP being strong, but no one, or a few, think it can be sustained, I should say, if if we don't get jobs to help support consumer spending going forward. And so I think we need to see improvement on the jobs front. If the number's a lot better than expected, I think it will go a long way to having sort of fueling the optimism that we saw earlier this week. On the other hand, we saw what a number like the June report, you know, where it was really disappointing, how quickly that can sap optimism. So I think it could have a big impact on how, you know, the markets will trade not only on Friday but over the coming month.
So in terms of weaker than expected, stronger than expected, how can we expect stocks to move? How can we expect bonds to move?
Well, again, I think if the number is stronger, if we get a smaller job decline, I think you're going to see a lot of optimism again sort of show itself, like we saw earlier in the week, about the economy. And I think that will set the stage for the stock market to continue to make gains. On the other hand, you know, if in fact the number is weak, we get another disappointing job loss larger than expected, it will call into question how sustainable any near-term uptick in, for example, GDP growth can be. All the people who think GDP growth was strong won't expect it to last if the job story doesn't follow into line.
Okay, a lot riding on this number tomorrow. Michelle Girard, thanks for joining us and getting us ready for it. Mark, I'm going to send it back over to you.
Kathleen, Michelle, thank you so much.